Hello, I'm Gus Downing, publisher and editor of the D&D Daily, and this is the LP News Network. With us today is Gary Johnson, Vice President, Loss Prevention for Vitamin Shoppe. Gary has over 25 years of LP experience and has held leadership positions with A&P Supermarkets, Barnes & Noble, Pier 1 Imports, and Osco drugstores. He's a former chairperson of the NRF LP Advisory Council and previously served as the Advisory Council's Vice Chair, Chairman of the Awards Committee, and a key member of the Conference Planning Committee and the NRF Investigators Network. Gary also serves on the editorial board for the LP magazine. He's a member of the American Society of Industrial Security and has earned his CPP designation. Today's session, entitled Workplace Violence, How to Defuse and Protect, is one Gary led here at the NRF Protect Conference in a roundtable type setting where he positioned various senior leaders at each table in order to truly drive value and content for this critical subject that impacts the entire industry in every store in America. We wanted to share this information with you not only as a means of showing the value NRF Protect adds to the industry, but also because of the critical nature and importance of this content. As we all know, workplace violence is a harsh reality of our world, and anything we can do to hopefully help prevent it, respond to it, and help those impacted by it is extremely important. In the session description, the NRF writes, workplace violence includes any conduct that jeopardizes an employee's personal safety. Increasingly, retail organizations are planning for and protecting against workplace violence committed by criminals, customers, and family members. What does this mean for your retail organization? Connect with retail LP leaders as they discuss the safety plans and training in their organizations and review their best practices for diffusing violent situations in the retail environment. As we mentioned, this session was in a roundtable setting which Gary led. So with that as our introduction, let's open up the conversation. Gary, thanks for being here.
Absolutely, thank you.
Gary, in our discussions about the session itself, you talked about how important it is for the Retail Associates of America to be able to recognize and understand the factors and various situations that increase workplace violence. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I think it's important for organizations to have training programs and the associates to understand what they're kind of up against. The retail store is often the only public place open, say at night or in low income communities, or as stores change and you have single coverage, staffing models change. Consider this. According to a Jackson Lewis survey, 2 million U.S. workers are victimized by workplace violence annually. Shocking number. Most of us know about flash mobs or active shooter situations. When you start looking at the other things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis, the numbers are staggering. That same survey says 4 out of 1,000 workers suffered from non-fatal violence. So again, outliers with fatalities and shootings and all the dangerous things, but there's an undercurrent of a lot of violence, fights, arguments over refunds, and how come I can't use this coupon? Whatever that may be, it causes this undercurrent of violence and hostility in stores. Understanding that, hiring folks to, or training folks rather, to deal with that, and as an organization, really having that as part of your workplace violence program is really key.
What recommendations do you have for identifying and diffusing these unsafe situations? And what role does the LP field team have in the process?
Well, there's a couple ways to answer that. I'm going to start at kind of the high level. I think the organization has to start with looking at their workplace violence program. Having an incident tracking program so you know what your issues are. Are you a women's apparel store with fitting rooms and maybe there's deviant behavior in the fitting room? Are you a convenience store, late night hours? So I think you have to understand that, what your incident trends are. From there, you could do a risk matrix and understand where your resources need to be deployed. That training program then has to be cross-functionally vetted with your legal team, your HR team, your store ops team. From there, then you can then execute a plan down to the stores to better recognize that. We've done things in my companies with tabletop exercises with that leadership team back at the office to make sure I know in a given situation how human resources may respond to something. The key takeaway at the end of the day, there's no playbook for this. You may decide to handle a situation one way based on who your victim in the store might be, who your assailant might be. Might be where in the country it is. Maybe I would react differently in Detroit than I would in Lincoln, Nebraska, for example. So doing those kind of mock drills with your leadership team to know how that team will respond to it is really critical, and again becomes the foundation for the training program, which then helps the stores recognize it and diffuse it. Really hard to say there's an instant program just to diffuse because we're humans. You may say something to me that I find offensive that to my coworker is nothing in its water off my back. So understanding it, knowing how to escalate within the store, and then ultimately if the store has in-store loss prevention folks, what's their role in kind of maybe separating. So take an example where there's a store and there's a particular customer who has a problem with you, you the manager. I'm okay with everybody else, but you bug me, so I want to yell and scream at you. The store can then have triage, escalations in terms of extracting you from the situation, having somebody else deal with them from a customer service perspective, and diffusing it that way. But first, it's understanding what the rules of the road are through the training programs, and then having some escalation points to do that.
That's if you got the payroll to be able to manage that.
Exactly.
And people that are paying attention to be able to hear it, see it, and react to it.
In addition, there's a human piece of that you may be okay with that kind of challenging behavior, and I might be more of an introvert and I would not want to. So as a store manager, you also have to understand the players on your team and who can handle that kind of pressure and who can then be the relief point.
So is almost a voluntary type interaction? I mean, do you allow associates not to be involved in that process if they feel uncomfortable with it?
No, they would still play a role. We would extract them from that. So let's say it's again a refund transaction and you're yelling at me and I am trying to diffuse it and talk to you and find out what your needs are, and you still aren't getting that, or we're not getting to a place of common ground, then I would bring another store associate, a management person in to help me with that situation. It's not enough to say, well, because I don't like you, I can't serve you. You still have to come up with a remediation for that.
Do you have this program like in writing so that the stores can read and learn it and communicate it on a store, district, regional level? I mean, is it that formal?
It's not exactly that formal. We have basic tenets and basic thematic components that are documented. The real training happens in the tabletop exercises, the role playing. A lot of folks could read a policy statement about how to handle something and sit back and go, I got this. The adrenaline, the pressure, doing it live is different. So we really find the role playing to be a critical part of that.
Can you share some best practices for protecting customer-facing employees in retail stores? And once again, how involved is the LP field team?
Well, again, I work in the specialty business, so the LP field team is involved a couple of ways. One, in helping to administer that training that we do, whether it's in a store audit function, a formalized training function, or even one-on-one kind of peer-to-peer learning, if you will. And much like we did in our tabletop exercise in the session, it is really about walking them through it. Loss prevention helps administer that training, and on the flip side, when in the specialty world, they're typically not in the store when a situation happens, so they're helping the district manager telephonically or the store manager telephonically kind of triage that and understanding when we're going to escalate to law enforcement sometimes, depending on the situation, or getting the district manager into the store and getting them kind of injected into the situation.
How about from an individual associate perspective? John is married, he's having problems in his marriage, he's communicating it with the store, and there is a potential problem with the spouse coming in the store and creating a scene. I mean, is that something that's in the tabletop exercise? Is that something that you folks, that you would have the teams talk about and communicate with? And when's the trigger? When is, excuse my parallel there, or analogy, but where's the spot where the DM gets involved, the regional LP or the director of LP gets involved?
Again, it's a fluid situation. There's no playbook, so it varies. So the initial training is around the in-store piece. The employees communicated, were put on notice that we have this issue. Then it would escalate to a district manager or regional director of store operations, and then to our crisis team in terms of, crisis is probably the wrong word, our intervention team.
And you have an intervention team?
Yeah, and that's made up of somebody from legal, loss prevention, and human resources.
And that's a corporate team?
Yes.
Okay, I understand.
So there are things that are sort of resolvable at the store level, but it all gets vetted through that group of folks who would talk through it. But in those situations, speed is very important to that resolution. So this is not a big bureaucratic process. The stores have some latitude to work through to escalate, and then given a very serious situation or guidance around a temporary restraining order or decisions around, do we want to perhaps transfer that employee from store A to store B to maybe have some separation between him and his spouse? Very unlikely in that scenario because the spouse or ex-spouse is going to know where he's at.
Right.
But it's around that awareness and guiding them through the legal process and encouraging them to get a temporary restraining order, for example, so that we could then, should there be a violation of that in the store, we would help affect that with the police and working through the restraining order.
Most people will be reluctant to communicate such things. I mean, you know, associates are going to be a little more introverted when it comes to that type of thing going on in their lives. I mean, how do you kind of present that to your employee population to let them know that it exists?
Again, it's through an open dialogue, it's through transparency, letting them know what our kind of expectation is, a little bit in that loyalty to what they should owe to their fellow employees. It is a very sensitive and private situation. They may or may not want to. In my experience, they typically disclose it when in their gut they really do believe it's a problem. And that ratchets up and escalates the importance.
Well, and they start missing work or
Sure.
coming in late or whatever. In really the key then there would be that the single unit store manager or the LPM of that store, the boots on the ground, so to speak, they're really going to be more sensitive to it, seeing it, being more aware of it. So the key is training those individuals.
Absolutely.
And then having the regional or district LP, trained adequately and in the game, so to speak, to be able to help and manage. So that's got to be a constant type of theme every day for everybody with the increased violence.
Yeah, it's a constant theme, and a lot of it's around just general awareness, right? We've moved from years ago when I broke into the business, we never even talked about it.
Right.
So just being conversant and being transparent and its reality and things happen, and there's a lot of comfort I believe our employees find that there's a plan. We're not just winging it. There is a plan. There's an escalation protocol. Not all that bureaucratic, but there's channels to get that done. It is kind of a constant drumbeat. Now, in our business, part of our culture is very strong. We're a health and wellness business, so our store staffs are small. It's very easy to get to know folks. People know what's happening in other people's lives. But again, it's not just the employee on employee. When you look at those types of interactions, they're often customer, on the store folks, the internal piece, even employee on employee. We recently had a situation which a young lady and another gentleman in our company had an affair. The fiance found out. Next thing you know, it's exploding on social media. There was an abduction. There's a lot of moving parts to that. And constituencies, you want to help your employee, but at the same time, you got folks back in the store too. So having a plan, having the right stakeholders in place, and having done tabletop exercises, the folks both locally and in the corporate level are ready and prepared to deal with it.
Last question for you. I mean, as the retailer's first responders, in loss prevention obviously plays a critical role in helping to train and develop our store teams. What advice do you have for the single unit LPM or the district LP manager? Because quite frankly, most people do tend to minimize, these stressful personal issues in the workplace. So the real question is, do you take things seriously? When do you take them seriously, and when do you communicate them?
Yeah, and again, I keep saying the same thing over. It's kind of that training piece, and by having those folks who can stay focused on it while your sales store manager, your district manager, they've got a business to run. So if you had an LP manager in the store, having somebody who can keep that focus and keep that conversation going, and having loss prevention people who have been trained in customer service applications, that know from our training standpoint what the expectations are, arming them with the right tools too. And then they also they can't be risk avoiders. They need to be able to get engaged in that conversation, whether it's a customer or a spouse of someone, having that injection point that you can get in and be the deflector if need be.
Yeah, and we had also talked about in our conversation about abuse, about employee abuse. I mean, there's many different factions of that, variables of that customers come into the stores and they abuse employees verbally, and certainly physically as well, but more verbally. How does that play into this, and what is that, so to speak?
Well, it definitely plays into it. Again, if you look at some study data and look at bullying and kind of fold that into the violence component, in a survey done in 2014 by, believe it or not, the Workplace Bullying Society, 27% of the survey respondents have experienced abusive bullying conduct. 21% have witnessed it and haven't done anything about it. and a staggering 65.6 million workers reported being affected by bullying. Think of that in terms of your lost time at work, your sick time, your absenteeism, but also think of that undercurrent that's running throughout your store. And when things become commonplace, oh, well, I work in this store and everybody gets yelled at and it just is what it is. And that complacency sets in, which then becomes kind of the cancer to all that prevention and proactive work that you did. I think in today's society, there is more bullying behavior that goes on, different expectations. People pull out their cell phones and want to challenge other folks. I believe retail workers across America face a lot of challenging situations. In our tabletop exercise we did here at the NRF, I showed some video clips that we pulled off of YouTube, and to see people arguing about the quality of their sandwich, or climbing through a fast food retailer's drive-through window and beating up somebody because the product was cold. It seems to be in our society of late, there's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to involving physicality and verbal abuse, not some kind of conflict resolution to handle it.
Well, maybe we should expand workplace violence, to include bullying and abusive behavior in the stores.
I would say the numbers support it. There's a lot of folks affected.
Well, Gary, thanks for taking the time today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you.
Well, that's it for this session, and we certainly hope that helps. As workplace violence is a harsh reality in our world, the loss prevention industry can make a huge impact, not only developing our store teams and helping to keep our customers safe, but also in hopefully saving some lives. We'd like to thank you for watching, and until next time, let's keep them all safe out there.